was a very large affair. It was only meant to be in 1924, and it was opened by King George V on St George's Day, 23rd of April 1924, meant to run through to October that year. But it did so well, nearly 17 million visitors during that year, that they decided to reopen it in 1925, and then another 10 million visitors then.
Being a young man in England these days, I don't really know that much about the British Empire, but I've always been around this area, seeing these buildings going up and down. Literally, I started work at 15 because I'd been expelled from school. My father had died from cancer. I went slightly off the rails, and they basically said that I can either leave or get kicked, so I walked. And as soon as I did that, because my father used to work at Wembley Stadium for an agency, as soon as he died, they said, whenever you need a job, you're more than welcome to it. So I took them up on their offer.
The British Empire, particularly Victorian times, it was seen as very much a British thing. All about Britain promoting itself around the world, taking from every country that it colonised or took over. But things were changing. The First World War had brought the countries of the Empire together a great deal. Some of the West African people taking part in the exhibition were bemedalled soldiers from the First World War who'd been fighting in Africa for the British Empire against the Germans. It represented people from all over the Empire. It was meant to promote trade for all of the countries throughout the Empire, and also for them to get to know each other. So it was a massive affair.
Growing up in Wembley, always walking past the Palace of Industries, not really knowing what they really were. But they were literally just big old buildings to me at the time. But after the old man died and had to go work for Wembley Stadium itself, starting in the arena, the conference centre, the stadium itself, we had to use most of the Palace of Industry for storage.
The Palace of Industry was one of the biggest buildings of the exhibition. The biggest of all was the Palace of Engineering, just across what was called Kingsway, what's now Olympic Way. They were the two main buildings on the northern end of the exhibition. Palace of Engineering was about 13 acres. Palace of Industry was over 10 acres of space. The outside walls were cast in place, but inside it was reinforced concrete precast spans that had been produced off-site and were assembled on-site for the exhibition, creating vast long galleries and lots of different spans to cover a huge area. This was a real collaboration between the architect Maxwell Ayrton and the consulting engineer Sir Owen Williams. And although it wasn't the most beautiful, some remarkable buildings with minarets and all sorts of decoration that they produced around the site, it was the most functional and has turned out to be the most long-lasting.
To be honest, I had to leave Wembley at some point in time because of my stabbing. It was too emotional to stick around this area, and also because I was with someone at the time, I wanted her to be safe as well, so moving away from the area to get a clean slate seemed like the best option.
In 2004, under the redevelopment plans, the building lost its listed status, which meant that it could be demolished. was very sad to see the Palace of Industry coming down. Because, okay, it looked faded and old and a bit out of place with all the modern buildings going up around it. But that was state-of-the-art British construction in reinforced concrete in the 1920s, with two of the top names, Maxwell Ayrton and Sir Owen Williams, involved in it, combining to create objects of beauty out of concrete. It was the first time really that that had been done, particularly on such a scale.
Obviously, I still work at Wembley because I've always worked at Wembley. It's been a great place to work. There's always been something interesting going on, and seeing the Palace of Industry and the Palace of Arts slowly crumble over the years is very sad, really. I mean, it's just like part of the furniture's been missing, and now seeing the last of the buildings gone, it really does hit home that it's never going to be the same as it was.
The Palace of Industry, it gave you a feel, not just for the construction of the buildings, especially when you could look inside and see the many reinforced concrete spans beautifully designed inside the building, but also gave you a feel of the style of the buildings and the scale of the buildings. Okay, you can look at photographs, now they're gone, but if you stand there and look up, and okay, we'll have a lion's head corbel, which may be 18 inches across the lion's face. When you look up, you think, oh, it's tiny, up on top of a 25, 30 foot high building. This was the scale of everything in the British Empire exhibition. And it's a pity, a great pity, that there's nothing left of that to see now.
I do reminisce about Wembley quite a bit. It still is the place where I grew up, and it has a lot of memories for me, both with my father, my mother. My mother's moved away as well, she's in Anglia at the moment. And it still tugs on the heartstrings a little bit, but you know, you just sort of plod on and get on with it.